Thank you. That's good. We'll get cozy. The last time we talked about the introduction, and we said that we must approach this Bhagavad Gita in a particular mood or spirit in order to understand the Bhagavad Gita, in order to really relish it. And we likened it to if you have a bottle of honey and you are licking the outside of the bottle of honey, will you taste the honey? You can lick for years and years, but you'll not taste. You're so close. You're separated by a few millimeters of glass, but you won't taste it. So similarly, this Bhagavad Gita, if we don't approach it in the mood of devotion, if we approach it in the mood of trying to understand our relationship with Krishna, trying to understand our relationship with the whole, and ultimately awakening this mood of devotion, then we can study this Bhagavad Gita for years and years and years and will not find any true realizations from it. So this is not a study of some academic or intellectual exercise, but it is an exercise of inquiry, to inquire using the intelligence we've been given, to get answers to questions about things that are troubling us, how to find clarity of purpose, how to become free from distress and fear and anxiety, how to find real lasting solutions. These are the questions that when we bring to the Bhagavad Gita, we actually find transformational answers to. But if we just go approaching it in a different mood, the answers are still there, but they won't penetrate the heart. So this mood of bhakti is very, very important as we approach this Bhagavad Gita. So that was one of the key themes we talked about in the beginning. We also established the authenticity of Bhagavad Gita. Ultimately, it was spoken by Krishna. So Krishna is the source of this Bhagavad Gita. And we are reading this Bhagavad Gita in Guru Parampara from Srila Prabhupada, who is presenting it in its original form. And thus it will also carry the real potency of the medicine. Just like if you take a medicine from a doctor and it's a pill, but if the pill has been manipulated, modified, then it won't have the potency of its intended effect. But if the pill comes in its original form, then it will have the full potency. So like that, this Bhagavad Gita is being presented. So we're very fortunate to have it like this. So today we'll discuss chapter 1, verse 1, and we'll read verse 1, and we'll read a few more verses to basically set the stage for what is transpiring. And then next week, we're going to take the second half of this chapter, where Arjuna's going to present 5 very compelling reasons why he should not fight the war. And the conclusion from that presentation that Arjuna draws is that he should not fight. But actually, Krishna is going to explain how, for each of his reasons, actually he should. And it brings us to a very pivotal, you get to a Y in the road, right? When you get to a Y in the road, you either have to go left or you have to go right. You cannot go straight, right? So in life, we're going to see that we really have one of two choices. And within that, there are many sub-choices. But either I'm going to live my life on the basis of I am this body, or I'm going to live my life on the basis of I am spirit soul. And then based on those decisions, just like if I go right on the Y in the road or left on the Y in the road, there are different things I'll encounter, different results and different consequences of that initial decision. So similarly, making that decision, it's one or the other. When I make decisions on the basis of my body, we're going to see how that is going to lead to the conditions that Arjuna was experiencing: fear, confusion, lamentation, distress, lack of fulfillment. This is the guaranteed result of any time we live through the perspective of I am this body. But if I live through the perspective of I am a spirit soul, which is my actual identity, because we know 100 years from now, will we have this body? 100 years ago, did we have this body? But was there an I? Was there a we? Yeah. So what was that? That is the soul. So if we live our life and make decisions according to I am a spirit soul, then we actually find the real happiness we're searching for. So Krishna is going to show in a very clever way how Arjuna's decisions, they seem very logical, but they're made on the perspective of I'm this body. And what happened was he ended up making the wrong decision. Actually, exactly opposite of what he thought he should do is what he should do. And this is the conundrum that we face when we don't come to approach our existence from the basis of who I really am, spirit soul. So that is how we'll introduce the next week. That'll be the next week's discussion. But so for today, we want to understand now what is happening on this battlefield and where are we, so that we have context for how this conversation is taking place. So we'll kind of set the scene, if you will, in today's discussion. Is that okay? Okay, good. So let us read the first verse. You can remember Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. Somebody would like to read the translation that's in bold?
Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjay, after my sons and the sons of Pandus assembled in the place of pilgrim at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do?
Okay. If someone else wants to read, we'll take turns reading the purport, so somebody can start the first few lines, first paragraph.
Bhagavad Gita is a widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, glorification of the Gita. There it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretation. The example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the way the teaching is understood by Arjuna, who heard the Gita directly from the Lord. If someone is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. One will find in Bhagavad Gita all that is contained in other scriptures, but the reader will also find things which are not to be found elsewhere. That is the specific standard of the Gita. It is the perfect theistic science because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna.
Okay, so let's discuss this paragraph briefly. So, what are the glories of the Bhagavad Gita? What do we say? What are some of the glories of studying the Bhagavad Gita?
It is essence of all Vedas.
So it's the essence of all Vedas. Yeah.
Was rightly spoken by Lord Shri Krishna.
It was directly spoken by Lord Shri Krishna, who is
Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can say he is the absolute authority, right? For example, if there is a minister in a king's court, right? And if a minister speaks, is the minister authorized to speak? Yes, because he's empowered by the king, right? So he can speak something. But now, is the minister the absolute authority? No. Why? Because king is there who's empowering. If king terminates that relationship with the minister, now what the minister speaks, does it have any weight, any bearing? No. So the source of the minister's authority is the king, right? The king in that context is the absolute authority, right? So when we hear from Shastra, there are many speakers of Shastra, right? But we should understand in context. But the unique position of this Bhagavad Gita is Krishna is speaking as the absolute authority, as himself. So there becomes no further need for clarification or maybe reconciliation because he is the ultimate authority. If two ministers are speaking and there is some dispute, that it becomes secondary once we hear from the king, right? Then whatever the minute doesn't matter, that becomes the right. So that makes this the essence of all Vedas and also the perfect authority. Now Arjuna had one benefit. What was Arjuna's special benefit? He's a friend. Yeah.
He got a chance to hear this Bhagavad Gita.
He got a chance to hear, like we see in this picture. He got a chance to hear directly from Krishna. So what about us? Not from me, but yes, through our parampara, we have a chance to hear this Bhagavad Gita. And actually, there is no difference in the potency of the message, in the power of the message, in the effect of the message, as long as it is come unchanged through disciplic succession. So the same benefit that Arjuna had hearing directly from Krishna, we also can have that same benefit. If we hear, Prabhupada says that in the Gita Mahatmya, it says, how should we study the Bhagavad Gita? He's in the third line, he makes a very nice statement there. How should we hear this Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, and just before that, what should be our part in that? Very scrutinizingly, right? Very scrutinizingly, but with the help of devotee. And Srila Prabhupada is helping us understand this Bhagavad Gita through his purports and through his very powerful explanations, which we'll be presenting as we go throughout this. But this is the means. So we should scrutinize. We should really be analytical, not be whimsical and just sort of take with it. Really try to understand and dissect and ask questions where we have doubts, to really understand this, because this is decisions this is information that's going to shape the decisions we make in life. So we don't want to take them just lightheartedly, but actually with some good analysis. So please, don't be shy with asking questions, with thinking and contemplating, sometimes the why or the what ifs. I mean, these are again how we're being advised that we should scrutinizingly um, inquire, but in the mood of humility, seeking help to learn. Right, in that way, we'll actually make great progress in studying the Bhagavad Gita. So,
One question before
yeah,
we start. So,
yeah.
why Arjuna didn't write the Gita?
Why Arjuna didn't write the Gita? So, remember, so Arjuna, we're going to see Arjuna was put into a position of confusion, right? And he approaches then. So it will see from about the 24th verse of this chapter until the 7th verse of the second chapter. He is putting forth all of his understandings and conclusions about what he should do and what should be the right course of action. But ultimately, he says, I am not finding peace in my decisions. I'm not finding conclusive conviction, and I'm confused. So, what did he do at that point? Surrender to and ask Krishna what?
What doubt he had?
Yeah, help me. Tell me what is best for me. He says, tell me decisively what is best for me. So everything Krishna speaks from that point forward, Krishna has only one goal. That is to help Arjuna find success. That's it. But as I said last time, actually, is Arjuna really confused? No. Arjuna was put in this position to give Krishna the opportunity to speak this very critical science. For whose benefit? All of us. Right? So Arjuna is playing a role in a drama so that Krishna has the platform, the stage, to then give this perfect knowledge. But remember, we'll see in the beginning of the 4th chapter, this most people don't know, but it's right in Bhagavad Gita. This is not the first time Bhagavad Gita was spoken. The Bhagavad Gita is not 5,000 years old. It is millions of years old. It has been spoken over and over again, many, many times. This time it is spoken here, as we see on the Kurukshetra battlefield. This is a repeat. So the dialogue, the Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavad Gita. Gita song of God. It is Krishna's discussion to Arjuna and answers to all of his questions that has been there. And it was a conversation. The conversation was later recorded into writing by Vedavyas. So he put it down into writing. So that is the context of the conversation. Right?
Yeah, so means something I didn't get means why Arjuna didn't write it because he was devoted at that time, so he don't have the things to write it.
That's the point. So Arjuna played the role of being confused and temporarily forgot his position of devotion so that Krishna could then explain to, again, really to all of us, how to find freedom from birth and death and this disease and this fear and stress and anxiety. Because as you rightfully indicate, Arjuna is a pure devotee. Of course, he knew all of this, right? Why he didn't speak it? Because he's playing the role of the disciple and Krishna is playing the role of guru so that we can understand. And our role, our goal is to follow in Arjuna's footsteps, how he became free from that. Okay? Good question.
Okay, I think the other side of the question is, where has the role this Bhagavad Gita based on the conversation? It could have been written by Arjuna elsewhere after the discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Like
But that wasn't his role.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the current age, what happens, when you success and you can start writing your book and it goes on.
Yeah. Arjuna had lots of other responsibilities in life. He was ruling a kingdom with his brothers. He was leading the world, and so he took his role, his duty, and Vedavyas, who is an incarnation of Krishna, the literary incarnation, came to put it in writing. Oh yeah, he's a incarnation of the Supreme Lord. He's a literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord.
Autobiography, there is a biography.
Yes. Okay. So let's yeah.
From where did Rishi Vedas came to know about Gita? He was there at the time it was being
I just told he is an incarnation, so he is empowered to know, right? So he has full knowledge, and thus he was able to. Because remember, this knowledge used to be passed down through oral reception. So what would happen? Uh, Someone who was there would speak it to somebody, they would remember it in full, and then pass it along. But that at the time, the mind was very sharp. As I mentioned, now we cannot even remember a single phone number. We have to put it into our phone, 10 digits. But remember, when we were kids, how many phone numbers we knew? We knew people's addresses, right? Like where they exactly. We had so much memory, but we have transferred all the memory here to here, right? But back in the olden days, people would hear this and they'd have full memory, and that's how it would get passed on without any adult. But as the age started to decline, then Vedya said, now that system is not reliable, so let me put it to writing. Of course, it's the Lord Himself coming, and that way He documented everything, so that now we are not dependent on what did you hear? I heard this. I heard that. Right? So now it's based on hard. Yeah? All right, let's read the next paragraph.
The topic discussed by Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya as described in the Mahabharata from the basic principle of this great philosophy. It is understood that this philosophy evolved on battlefield of Kurukshetra, which is sacred place of pilgrim from immemorial time of Vedic age. It was spoken by the Lord when he was present personally on this planet for the guidance of mankind.
Okay, so why was it spoken?
To guide them.
The guidance of
Guidance. So we should approach it as a guide. a true life guide. Right? Okay, let's read the next paragraph.
The word Dharmakshetra is significant because on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present on the side of Arjuna. Dhritarashtra, the father of the Kurus, was highly doubtful about the possibility of his son's ultimate victory. In his doubt, he inquired from his secretary Sanjay, what did they do? He was confident that both his sons and the sons of his younger brother Pandu were assembled in that field of Kurukshetra for a determined engagement of the war. Still, his inquiry is significant. He did not want a compromise between the cousins and brothers, and he wanted to be sure of the fate of his sons on the battlefield. Because of the battle was arranged to be fought at Kurukshetra, which is mentioned elsewhere in the Vedas as a place of worship, even for the denizens of heavens. Dhritarashtra became very fearful about the influence of the holy place on the outcome of the battle. He knew very well that this would influence Arjuna and the sons of Pandu favorably because by nature they were all virtuous. Sanjay was a student of Vyas, and therefore, by the mercy of Vyas, Sanjay was able to envision the battlefield of Kurukshetra, even while he was in the room of Dhritarashtra. And so Dhritarashtra asked him about the situation on the battlefield.
Hmm. So remember now, this verse is opening with Dhritarashtra speaking to Sanjaya, who Dhritarashtra is not able to see. Sanjaya has been blessed to be able to see, and so he is going to relay what he has seen. Right. So now this battle is taking place where? Kurukshetra, and Kurukshetra is also known as religious place, Dharma Kshetra. Right? So this Kurukshetra has a very significant history. How it became known as Kurukshetra, um, the place of worship, how it became the place of worship, because there was a great king by the name of King Kuru, and King Kuru had come to this place. It was a very beautiful place along the banks of the Saraswati, and he decided that he was going to make this a place of righteousness, and he was going to cultivate this area and grow the 8 virtues. And so he took his golden chariot, he had a very elaborate golden chariot, and he dismantled it and remade it into a plow. And he was very powerful, so he was able to borrow the bull of Lord Shiva and the buffalo of Yama. And from that, he was plowing the field. And Lord Indra came to see, what are you doing, King Kuru? And King Kuru tells him, I am, cultivating the 8 virtues. Um, and Lord Indra somewhat mockingly said, "Oh, where are you going to get the seeds for those?" And he said, "Don't worry, I have them." And so Lord Indra left, and the king continued. And Lord Vishnu, seeing this, became very pleased. So he came sometime later and said, "My dear king, what are you doing?" He says, I want to make this a place where, the great virtues of mankind can arise. And so he says, well, do you have the seeds? And he says, then if you do, then I'll personally I'll plant them for you. So Lord Vishnu is saying, so he says, where are the seeds? And he says, well, and so he offers out his right arm first. And he offers his right arm. And with Lord Vishnu's chakra, cuts his arm into pieces and plants, and then his left arm, and then legs, and then head, whole body. And Lord Vishnu became, very pleased that this was a sacrifice of his own position for the virtues of mankind. And so Krishna established that this place would be now known henceforward as Kurukshetra. So that's how it became known as Kurukshetra. But he said he gave it 2 benedictions. It would eternally remain a place of pilgrimage, of dharma, where one can cultivate the good values in spiritual life. And so this Dharma Kshetra became established by the great King Kuru. And that's why it is known as Kurukshetra. And so in a few moments, we'll talk about some of the symbols of victory. But let us read this last paragraph and then we'll continue.
Both the Pandava and the son of the Dhritarashtra belong to the same family. The Dhritarashtra mind is disclosed herein, and he, deliberately claimed only his son as the Kuru, and he separated the son of the Pandav from the family heritage. One can thus understand the specific position of the Dhritarashtra in his relationship with the nephew, the son of the Pandu, as the Pandu filled, unnecessarily plant are taken out. So it is expected from the very beginning of those topics that into the religion field of the Kurukshetra, where the father of the religion, Sri Krishna, was present, the un- unwanted plant like the Dhritarashtra son Duryodhana and other would be wiped out, and there there truly religious person held by the Yudhishthira would be the established by the Lord. This is the significance of the word dharma, dharma kshetra and kurukshetra apart from his historical and the Vedic context.
So we see what is Sanjaya or Dhritarashtra actually perceiving because this war is taking place on Dharmashetra. Is it a good sign for him or a bad sign? Bad sign. And why is it a bad sign?
Because he knows what is which is dharma from truth.
So this brings us to an interesting point. He knows, yet is he willing at this point to reconcile the differences, set aside the distinctions between his sons and his brother's sons? He knows this is not going to go well, but still he'll not make the. So this is the power of an uncontrolled mind. When the mind becomes filled with bad thoughts, bad association, even when the intelligence knows something is wrong, still we do it. And we've all had that experience in life. We've done something we knew we shouldn't, but we still did it. Right? That is when the mind overtakes the intelligence. But in the rightful nature, always the intelligence should decide what to do and what not to do. And we should sharpen that intelligence. Krishna will tell us in the 15th chapter the need to sharpen our intelligence with the weapon of knowledge. But in this case, Dhritarashtra knew, but still he knew. And Prabhupada gives the example of in the field. What do we do in the field when we are trying to plant some crops? We have to take out the weeds. So this metaphor is meaning used that the unrighteous are going to be removed from this battlefield. Okay? So this is the setting. Now, the next several verses we're just going to kind of skim because we're going to see in this dialogue there are many inner dialogues happening, and there is always a kind of a reason for the flow from one topic to the next, particularly as we start getting into chapter 2, and we're going to explain how these topics are flowing and build some kind of schematic understanding of this, so that when we read each individual verse, sometimes it's hard to see the big picture of where we are. So we'll try to provide that context as we go verse by verse, so that we can understand kind of the big and then also the specific details of the specific verse. So these next several verses now, Sanjaya is speaking, and he is conveying first what Duryodhan is doing in the battle, right? So Duryodhan is a very savvy and sophisticated diplomat, not necessarily righteous, but certainly sophisticated. And we see, very intelligent, very strong, very powerful personalities sometimes using their skills and blessings for unjust things, right? We see it in the world around us today. We've seen it in the history as we study our history books of, very powerful people who have done very devastating things, so like that. But we'll see Duryodhan has a very interesting approach here in the next several verses. So in verse 2, we see Sanjaya now begins to speak that the militaries were arranged on the battlefield, right? And Duryodhan went to his teacher and began to speak. So he went to Dronacharya, who taught both the Pandavas and Kauravas on the skill of warfare. But Dronacharya, we know, was on the side of Duryodhan. So he does a very interesting thing in verse 3. He says that the great army of the sons of Pandu are expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. Now, he purposefully brings in Drupad's name because Dronacharya and King Drupad had a conflict, right? And we know Drishtadyumna had taken a vow and that he would, kill the enemy of his father. But who was the teacher of Drishtadyumna? Dronacharya himself, because he still continued his duty as teacher, even though the disciple was going to use it even against him. That was the liberal nature. But that's not as important. The point is here that Duryodhana is very intelligent because he's trying to draw the emotion to fight on his side because he knows Dronacharya has a very soft heart for the Pandavas. So he knows they may not give their full effort in battle. So he points out, his enemy in speaking to about the other side, right? And here then he goes on to glorify some of the strong warriors on the other side in verse 4. And he refers to Bhima and Arjuna and Yudhan and others, saying many great warriors have assembled here. So in essence, don't underestimate, because we know who had the more numbers? Kauravas. Because Kauravas had whose army on their side? Krishna's army. Right? So Krishna gave the choice. Either you can have me or my army. But I won't pick up any weapons. And of course, Duryodhan took the army. So he wanted, but he wanted to make sure. So again, Duryodhan is being very, sharp here. Don't let your soft heart weaken your effort. Don't think because we are in number. Look, very great warriors are assembled here, right? And then in verse 5, he continues to call out very, specific warriors in verse 6. And in verse 7. And then in verse 8, Duryodhana now shifts gears, right? And he says, well, I don't want everybody to feel. So now he begins to prop up his own side because everyone's hearing how he is speaking to Dronacharya, right? So he then says, there are great personalities like you. This is the beginning of verse 8, speaking to Dronacharya. And of course, Bhishma Pita, Karna, and Ashwatthama, and many other. Right? So we also have, very powerful warriors on our side, right? And they are, prepared to die and whatnot. So then in verse 10, Duryodhana now shifts his focus to Bhishma Pita. So he was kind of propped up Dronacharya, but you also know Bhishma Pita also, is conflicted in heart, right? He knows that Bhishma Pita has taken the side of Duryodhan, but these are his grandchildren, so he might be weakened, right? So he says that our strength is immeasurable because we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma. So this word aparyaptam actually has two meanings. It can mean immeasurable, or also it can mean insufficient. So actually, Duryodhan being very political, like politicians sometimes can say one thing and mean two different things at the same time. That is a clever use of the tongue. So Duryodhan is very political this way. So on the one hand, he is saying that it is the immeasurable strength because we are protected by Bhishma Pita, right? Where Pandavas are protected by who? Bhima, and who is limited according to Duryodhana. So you can see his conscience, right? So now first he says Bhishma Pita is very powerful, right? But then in the very next verse, what does he say? In verse 11,
All of you must support this.
right? So now he's saying, but we must protect grandfather Bhishma, right? Because Duryodhana, again, very smart. We know what happens when the heart is full of envy. One of the characteristics when the heart is full of envy is this: if person A is glorified, person B who has envy feels pain. Now, nothing was said to criticize person B. Nothing was said to, shame their character. Anything. Simply something was said to glorify person A. Has nothing to do with person B. Yet who feels pain? Person B. Why? Envy in the heart. Oh, you make nice rasgullas. The person A. And person B is thinking, what, I don't make rasgullas? That wasn't said. Maybe the person thinks actually you make the best. He just said you make nice. But when there's envy in the heart, this is what happens. So Duryodhana knows that when he glorifies Bhishma Pita, even though he's the worshipable personality, others will feel, what about me? What about me? Duryodhana being very expert. What does he say? All of you must now give full support to grandfather Bhishma. And references to, he's older. So we must protect, right? As you stand at your respective strategic points of entrance into the army, you must strategically protect this army. So you can see again, Duryodhana is being very, very political here, right? Now, what we see in the 12th verse is very interesting. So Bhishma Pita doesn't reply in words. We say in the saying, words are cheap, but action is louder. So what does Bhishma Pita do in the 12th verse? What did he do?
Blew his concept.
He blew his conch shell. So this actually signifies technically the beginning of the war. So Vedic warfare was, as war can be, very structured and actually civilized. So there was no, attack from the back side. There was always front. There would be an official start time and an official end during the day. And when the war ended, all the sides would mix. They would have prasad together, and next day they would battle again. So it was very structured in how these wars are conducted. Okay? So Bhishma Pita blew his conch shell. Okay. And after that, in verse 13, we see many other drums and trumpets and horns. So you can see what's happening now. You can imagine, right? Millions of warriors have assembled on this battlefield. Some conversations are taking place, and Bhishma Pita has blown his conch. So something significant has happened, indicating the beginning of this, right? And then on 14, on verse 14, we see now Sanjay is speaking about the other side. And who's on the other side? Yeah. Krishna and Arjuna, right? Stationed on a great chariot. And what did they do?
They also blew their concept.
They also blew their conch shells. So now this, Acharya's comment, is very important. So when Bhishma Pita blew his conch shell, there was a sound, but nothing happened. But when Krishna and the Pandavas, when they blew their conch shell, something happened. And what happened? The hearts of all the Kauravas shattered. Their faith, their knees became weak. They became completely bewildered just by the blowing of the conch shells. So this, we see in the very beginning of the war There's a distinct difference. Although the action is the same, both blew conchs, the result very, very different. Right? So when Krishna and Arjuna and the Pandavas blew their conch shells, there was this shattering of the hearts. Okay? So now there are 4 specific signs of victory that are pointing to Arjuna and the Pandavas being victorious. We discussed the first one already. Anybody remember? What is like the first sign that we discussed in the very first verse of victory for the Pandavas? Okay, so Krishna being on their side. So file that one away. What is another one? Yes. So the first sign is taking place in a holy place. A holy place will favor the holy and disfavor the unholy. Basic principles, right? So because the battle is taking place in Kurukshetra, that was the first sign that this war was not going to go in the favor of the Kauravas. Now we saw the conch shells. Right? So that is the second sign. Something distinct happened. Right? And then we'll get to the let's see here. In verse 19, if you read in verse 19, you see here that the blowing of the different conch shells, it shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. Right? So Sanjaya is conveying this to Dhritarashtra, that your sons' hearts became shattered when these conch shells were blown. So you can imagine the mood of Dhritarashtra is building here, right? So now in the 20th verse, we see Arjuna seated in a chariot marked with the flag of Hanumanji. So Hanumanji also is here on the battlefield in the presence of the flag and the chariot. And this is the 4th sign of victory for the Pandavas. There's a nice pastime between Bhim and Hanumanji when Bhim was walking on a trail in the Himalayas and Hanumanji's tail is in the trail. And he says, "Move your tail. I am old." He says, "Move your tail." He says, "I am old." And he says, and Hanuman says, "If you want to move my tail, you move it." This big, powerful Bhimsen, he goes and he could not even budge Hanuman's tail 1 millimeter. And he thought, who is this, supposedly old monkey? And then a nice, sweet pastime occurs. They have a nice discussion of their relations, and he told Bhim that when you are in battle in Kurukshetra, when you roar, I will be roaring with you and accompanying your roar, and that will spark fear in anyone who hears your roar. So every time Bhim was, roaring in battle, actually Hanumanji was adding his own power, and in that way he was supporting Bhim and the Pandavas. So this was the 3rd sign of victory. And what is the ultimate sign of victory? Mataji, you said the very in the beginning. You went to the first, which is Lord Krishna is there. So you can do some mathematics. And this is the problem of our mental, material mind. Duryodhan had the choice. Krishna, but with no weapons, no fighting. I'll simply be taxi driver. Or you have Krishna's army, full of weapons, full of skill, full of fighting. Which is more powerful?
Materialistically, the army.
Materialistically, the army. But with the slightest of knowledge, which is more powerful? Do we see the dangers of a maturely conditioned intelligence? The answer is so obvious. Who should you take? Krishna. Krishna. Because Krishna is never defeated. He is never defeated. So when we approach things with our own understanding, our own analysis, because we are conditioned by different perspectives that we have acquired, we're likely to make the wrong decision. But if you read in Srimad Bhagavatam, the great rishis, the great kings, they're constantly confronted with decisions. What should I do? Do I do this? Do I do this? And what they always did was they consulted the brahmanas, the sages, who knew how to analyze a situation and make the best decision. The great example of Ambarish Maharaj, when Durvasa Muni came to see him at the time of breaking the fast on Dwadashi, he didn't know what to do. He was in a dilemma. If I don't break the fast, all the citizens will not benefit from this fast. If I do break the fast, I'll transgress etiquette of honoring prasad before my guest, Durvasa Muni. What to do? He didn't make a decision on his own. He consulted, and he found the perfect solution. Take some achman. Like this, when we are guided in our decisions, we make good decisions. Because Duryodhan, we know, he made the wrong. So the ultimate sign of victory here is Krishna. Is it? Yeah.
So, is it possible that the Duryodhana make the right decision at that time, because he might think that since Krishna is not with him, he will not be fully support me. So let Krishna be onto the Arjuna side, and at least the army, for sure, he might have thought that okay, army doesn't have anything, so army will support me. But the Krishna, if I will take it also, he might not support me because I'm onto that side.
So Krishna is very liberal. If Duryodhan would have taken Krishna, Krishna would have taken it as surrender, taking Krishna's help, and then Krishna would have fulfilled. So that would have been his first step towards purifying of his consciousness, right? Duryodhana was misguided by his intentions, desires, and through taking Krishna as his guru, as his guide, he would have resolved all of those, and he would have become perfected,
Yeah.
and he would have been successful.
Yeah, so it might possible that Duryodhana would have thought, okay, if I will take this guy, he will preach me unnecessarily. That whole life I argue with him, right? So
And that's his
yes,
that's
that's
his
what might-
ignorance, right? Lack of intelligence. He's thinking, I don't want this guy to preach to me. What he should say is, I need him to preach to me.
that was the conflict, right?
Yeah.
Because Duryodhana was on his own. That is why.
How many people we say, come and study Bhagavad Gita? I don't need Bhagavad Gita in my life. I have all the answers. Actually, most of society are convinced I have the answers. I don't need this to tell me what to do. Okay? Good luck. So Duryodhana was in that same position, right? But the main principal point is that when we take decisions from a maturely conditioned mind, what seems so obvious, one without weapons, millions with weapons, such an obvious decision actually is so clearly wrong. And this is why we see so much suffering, because we're constantly making decisions that we think are right, and all we are doing is planting the seeds for so much future suffering. But by simply asking, taking guidance, one can actually find the proper path. He could have simply said to Krishna, Krishna, what do you think is best? You decide. Then Krishna would have told. Because what Arjuna is going to tell, Arjuna is going to give us now in the verses we'll begin discussing next week, all the reasons why he does not want to fight. But in the end, Arjuna makes a very powerful mood of surrender. He doesn't say, please bless my desire. He doesn't say, please sanction my desire not to fight. Please give me the blessing so that I don't have to fight. He doesn't say any of that. What does he say? He says, you please tell me what is best for me. He doesn't say, please help me get out of this war. Why? Because he has faith that if Krishna tells him to be in the war, then it must be the best thing for me. Right? And we know this. In our childhood, our mothers and father told us to do things we didn't want to do. Later, we realized it was for our good. When they told us study, 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 and we wanted to play, play, play. Right? So Arjuna said, I'm a child. I know I don't want to fight, but I know you have the answers, Krishna. So you tell me decisively what is best for me. When we approach Krishna in this mood, then we actually get the best result. If we go to Krishna with Krishna sanction this desire, the problem is we are not letting Krishna's better options manifest. Right? Because now we're saying, Krishna, give me this, instead of saying, Krishna, you do what's best. Having faith that Krishna knows more, and two, he loves us and will only give us what is best. Right? So Arjuna will show us this perfect mood of surrender. Not easy, but this is the perfection of mood. And when we do, then we will get the real knowledge, and the real knowledge will actually enter the heart. And so we'll follow that, because in next week's conversation now, what we'll do is we'll discuss the 5 reasons why Arjuna did not want to fight. And they're going to sound like, wow, perfect reasons. I should forgive. It's nice to forgive. It's a sin to kill. It's my duty to protect society. And if everyone is dead, who's going to keep society and structure? All these wow. And we're going to left thinking, how is Krishna going to defeat these? So that's what we'll discuss next week. Okay. So we saw now this week the Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra. So why it took place here, the 4 signs of victory, and how Dhritarashtra is hearing from the mouth of Sanjaya what is transpiring. And Arjuna now has asked Krishna, please take the chariot into the middle of the battlefield. So Krishna will now bring the chariot into the middle. Krishna has not yet spoken one word yet of the Bhagavad Gita. He has not spoken yet. And he's not going to speak until Arjuna asks. Okay. Any other questions or comments on today's discussion? Yes. Why did he sacrifice his army? So there was an interesting dynamic here that one of the benedictions King Kuru get also was that when Krishna is on the battlefield, and this is a benediction in any place, but specifically here also, that so the 2 benedictions King Kuru got, one was that this would become an eternal site of Dharma, named after you, and 2, whoever leaves their body here in the presence of the Lord will go back to the spiritual world. So actually, the great warriors and Kshatriyas of that time, they were fleeing to the battlefield. And they didn't care which side they were on, because they knew Krishna was there. Fighting this battle, Krishna must have some plan. Some might try to criticize why Krishna arranged this, so much bloodshed, this, that, and the other. Lots of commentary comes. But they had faith. Krishna's plan is always perfect. So he's assembled a war here, let us go. We didn't care, because they knew anyone who leaves their body on that battlefield returns back home, back to Godhead. So he was not sacrificing his army, because in the end, remember, we are not this body, we are spirit soul. And so Krishna is going to tell Arjuna, do not look at Duryodhana and Drona and Bhishma as body. Look at each of them as soul. And then decide what's best for them, to save their body or to save their soul. And I'll just give you a quick preview. Duryodhana did good actions or bad actions? Bad actions leads to bad reactions, suffering. How much future suffering is destined for Duryodhana? A lot. A lot. Right? Now, I just told you, if Duryodhana leaves his body on this battlefield, what happens to Duryodhana? Goes back to the spiritual. What happened to his past karma? All wiped out. So now what's best for Duryodhana? Preserve his body and let him continue to accumulate more sins and then have to suffer it, or end it there so his soul can go back home? What's best? So from a body consciousness, it says don't fight. But from a soul consciousness, now again we have to be careful. We cannot say, "Oh, you're not this body, your soul," and slap. No, it doesn't work that way. It has to be done according to dharma. But that is why. So he did not sacrifice his armor. They were also all benefited. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
What was King Kuru was planting as 8 virtues?
What was he?
What was those 8 virtues?
Oh, those are like truthfulness, austerity, cleanliness, celibacy. These 8 basically Brahminical virtues and qualities. Yep. That Krishna will explain in the 18th chapter. Any other questions?
That's why it's called Kuru Dynasty.
Huh?
Kuru Dynasty.
From King, coming from King Kuru. Yeah.
Pandavas, Dhritarashtra and Pandu, they were in that family lineage.
Yeah. They're all one
Yeah.
family. And that was Dhritarashtra's ultimate misguidance, thinking mine versus yours. Yes.
Regarding what
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Nice. So when Srila Prabhupada went to Kurukshetra, actually Kurukshetra and Srila Prabhupada have a very long history. Um, you know that when Srila Prabhupada wanted to come to the West, he was trying to find a way to come to New York, because that's what his spiritual master had asked him to do many years earlier, and he was struggling to find. And he found that one lady, she had owned a steamship company, and she was a nice devotee. She was a Vaishnava. And so he approached her in Bombay, and much endeavor, had to wait, 6-8 hours in her office. The secretary kicked him out, so he was waiting in the stairwell. And as she was leaving, she asked, "Oh, you're a saintly person. Why are you here?" And he explained, said, "Okay, come back tomorrow." So long story. And when they finally met, she, after much reluctance, she gave Srila Prabhupada passage on one of her cargo ships to Jaladuta to come to the U.S. So, and her name was Sumati Morarji, and she writes that when she saw Srila Prabhupada in Mumbai in her office, she remembered him. And where she remembered him, the first time she saw him was actually at Kurukshetra. There was a great program there, and Srila Prabhupada had gone, and he was sitting under a tree, and he was chanting japa. And she had also come to that venue, and she just took note of him. Didn't know who he was, didn't meet, didn't speak. But when they met many, many years later, she recalled that encounter with Srila Prabhupada years before in Kurukshetra. So that's the first sign. And Srila Prabhupada had a very strong desire that a grand Krishna Arjuna temple be built in Kurukshetra, so that the world can come to know, this Bhagavad Gita as it is. This knowledge is so powerful for truly saving humanity. and so he wanted to establish, right near or at the place where this place where Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. And so he took several devotees with him once, and they went to Kurukshetra. And the place where Krishna spoke is called Jyotisar. It is still there if you go there, and there's a nice tree there, and they've memorialized the actual speaking place. And right there, just a few meters away, we're kind of right down the street. Um, Srila Prabhupada's dream is becoming fulfilled, and a very grand Kurukshetra temple is being built. It'll house Krishna Arjuna, the first in the world Krishna Arjuna in the Archa Vigraha form, and there it'll become a base of obviously worshiping the Supreme Lord and Arjuna, and also for propagating the real message of Bhagavad Gita. So it's a very, very powerful and important project, and one of the few remaining desire work. Srila Prabhupada has some very specific projects and temples that he wanted to have established. This is one of the very, very important ones. So many devotees are working very hard in India to bring this thing, and hopefully it should open, sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. Actually, it is nearing completion, so it's quite a grand project, and you all should make point to go and see it and have darshan. It'll be very, very spectacular, and many persons are eagerly awaiting this, including the Prime Minister himself. Has become aware of this. Hema Malini has gone there several times. It's a very high profile project to establish in Dharmashetra this, Bhagavad Gita as it is. Wonderful opportunity.
YouTube videos also.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's a huge project. So yes, it's in the shape of a chariot with giant horses in the front. It's very, very artistic and very nicely done. Any other questions or comments? Yes. In Kurukshetra, where in our, it's about 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours north of Delhi. Yeah. So it's a nice road from Delhi. Now you can reach pretty quickly. Very beautiful town, very peaceful town, very pious town. You don't see any, illicit activities. You don't see heavy industry. The air is a very nice, peaceful place. Kurukshetra is a very auspicious for many reasons. We know Krishna met Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda and all the gopis and the cowherd boys after years of separation in Kurukshetra to observe the eclipse. The Brahma Sarovar is there. There's lots of different activities took place there. The place where Bhishma Pita left his body, lying on the bed of arrows. Very, very nice spiritually church-charged place. Yeah, yeah, it has a clayish color, reddish color. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Or? Yeah.
Why did Brahmacharya ask Eklavya to sacrifice?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a scholar on the intricacies of the Mahabharata, for full disclosure. I don't know. That's why I can't comment on it. It's not in the Gita. I know that.
I saw that in Mahabharata.
Yeah. It's not in the Gita, so I cannot comment on it. Yes.
Is there any significance of this constant other than beginning and starting of the? Is there any significance to this?
Yeah, the Krishna's conch shell has a long history, the Panchajanya conch shell, but it's a spiritual item that's used in worship, and we have two types of conch shells. So the one that we blow is a manifestation, a representation of Lord Vishnu himself in an expansion of Lord Balaram, and then the other conch shells we use for like Abhishek and things is a representation of Mother Lakshmi, Lakshmi Devi. So their auspicious article is used in worship, um, and so that's why we, at the beginning of Arti, we blow the conch shell, right, to signify the beginning of this auspicious activity, which is about to commence, the offering of Arti to the Lord. Are there any other questions? So I just wanted to quickly, we talked a little bit about this last time, or in the seminar, but just about offering foods. So hopefully some of you have started to, offer your foodstuffs at home. So some questions have come, how to do, what to do. So just a little refresher, but we remember that all foodstuffs ultimately are coming by the mercy of Krishna. We can plant the seeds, but who is providing the soil that the seeds will grow? Who is providing the sunlight, the rain? It is all coming from the Supreme Lord. And so we have this responsibility to, when we prepare food for stuff, Krishna knows that we need our sustenance, and He has set aside sufficient food for all of us. Yet we have the responsibility to offer our food to the Lord first, and thus when we receive it back, we get the great blessings of receiving Krishna Prasadam, which is so potent that if one takes Prasadam just once, they are guaranteed a human birth in the next life. So we know how valuable the human birth is. 8.4 million options we have, only one. We have this option. They're guaranteed that. This is how powerful. But by honoring Prasadam, we purify the heart. It is a form of devotional service, as we know. A, B, C, and D. Right? What is A? B? Books. C? And D? Diet. That's honoring Prasadam. If we just do these four things, A, B, C, D, actually everything is covered. So in the daily process, foodstuffs that we are preparing at home, if you can prepare them with, certain procedures, you can gain the benefit of this. And the procedures are, it's simple. Like, when someone comes to our house for dinner, we have to cook for them what they like, right? And so Krishna has certain things he likes and certain things he doesn't like. So he eats foods that are only in the mode of goodness. All foods are categorized into one of three modes, either sattvagun, rajagun, or tamagun. And so he eats foods that are in sattvagun. So that, of course, includes all fruits, vegetables, milk, nuts, things like that. He, of course, abstains from all meat items, eggs, and also onion and garlic, which, I know that that's typically the two hardest things, as we've, become accustomed to sort of cooking in certain dimensions. So, but we have, lots of people can help you understand how to, make very, very wonderful, flavorful uh, preparations without onion and garlic. But if you can prepare foodstuffs in this manner, and without tasting it along the way, uh, but just having faith that Krishna will inspire you in your heart to make it properly. Do not taste it along the way, and then offer to the Lord. And so, offering it to the Lord, as I mentioned, it should have a dedicated plate that's just His, not one that we have eaten from. So, if it's a clean plate, ideally, if you have some kind of steel or silver, that's best. But some there's a plate, and it should be easily identifiable, so we don't mix it with ours. And we put offerings that we want to offer to the Lord, and we put in front of a picture of Krishna, and ideally you have a small altar set up in your home. And the simplest and most effective way initially is just simply to fold our hands and say, Krishna, I'm offering to you with love and devotion. Will you please accept it? And that is sufficient for the Lord to hear our prayer and to accept that offering. because he is not accepting the rice, dal, sabji, the salt and spices. He is accepting the love that went into it. That is what he's looking for. So when we offer that way, then we can get that. Yeah? And then, of course, there are some different mantras and things to chant. But that I want to really emphasize should come after we have developed this mood of cooking and offering with love and devotion. So sometimes by articulating, because when we chant mantras, we sometimes forget the mood that we're supposed to create. So I like to suggest in the beginning we just focus on this Krishna, I'm offering to you with love and devotion. Will you please accept it? And like that, it'll help us set the mood. And you can leave the offering there for 10, 15 minutes, whatever your time allows, and then you can pick up, transfer out, and then we all can honor. But it's a very powerful way to make our whole home a temple-like environment, to purify our the cleansing and covering of the soul, and also to nourish the body. It's a very great way to engage our family in devotion, and a very powerful thing. So try it, and more, and come to the point of honoring prasadam, because Krishna does say that in the 13th verse of the third chapter, one who, if we eat something that's not offered, ultimately there's some level of sin associated with it. Because even if I pluck an apple from a tree, there's some pain I'm causing to that tree. Right? There's also a life, right? So the only way to become fully free is if I offer to the Lord, because He says, "Aham tum sarva papi." I take all the reactions. So that's an opportunity we have. Okay, so please try it, and you'll find great benefit for you and your family. Okay? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Okay, so now we'll do our chanting. I have some beads. Anybody needs beads? I need some